Hello everybody, and in this episode of Nikon Sessions we're going to be talking about news photography. I'm really excited about some of the things that we're going to talk about, but I suppose a really good place to start is your introductions, and if you guys can introduce yourself, just talk to me about what you shoot and who you are and how you go about your daily career.
Sure, my name's Neal. I'm a staff editorial photographer with Getty Image, based in London. I'm covering the Europe, Middle East and Africa region, but it's mainly a little bit closer to home, covering news, features, anything along those lines.
I'm Lucy Young. I'm a freelance photographer for about 18 years. In that time I've done everything from the downfall of a dictator to celebrities on the red carpet. I work for a range of newspapers and mainly based in London, but a few things out in New York, Kenya, all sorts of things.
So I suppose one of the things that I really want to talk about first of all is that, I mean, you guys would have some of the most viewed images of a lot of photographers because you are out there shooting some of the most poignant moments in time. How did you get to where you are? How do you become a news photographer? Is it that you're interested in daily events and news first, or is it that you're interested in photography and then you kind of drift into that news segment?
Well, for me, I started out as a musician. I was playing in bands, and as a part of that I was also taking pictures at the same time, but I've always had a real interest in news, and so when my music career faded and died, I looked at what else I was interested in, what I could do, and I thought, okay, well, I like news, I like photography, let's bring it together. And I went and did the photojournalism course in Sheffield, the NCTJ course, and at the end of that I was very lucky enough to win a scholarship at the Times, and from then moved on.
I actually started, I knew I wanted to be a photographer since I was a kid,
right,
but
okay.
I was actually interested in, David Attenborough was kind of my inspiration when I was a kid. I used to love watching those shows and I kind of wanted to be a videographer, but as I got a bit older I became more interested in people, and then I started looking at other photographers and stuff, not until I was in college really, and from there did my degree in documentary photography and moved into London to just find work. So I started in local newspapers and kind of worked my way up through there. But news has always been my first love really, kind of since I was a kid.
Is there something that you have to keep in the back of your mind, that you're trying to tell a true story about the truth of what's going on? And I suppose that's a very important part of what you guys do, right?
Well, at Getty Images, it's all about thinking about all of our clients. We have all sorts of different publications, websites, newspapers around the world of all sorts of political biases, leanings. So when you go and cover a story, it's not like you're going in there and going, oh, well, this is the only way to do it. You have to think of every different possible angle and cover it totally fairly, without any bias, so that everyone will have a picture that they can use from it. It's going in there and shooting it from as many different points of view as possible means that you're not necessarily going to be forging a way through to an angle on the story. That actually is quite freeing in a way, because you're not in the back of your mind always thinking about how can I match this to a journalist's particular angle that they want to do this on.
Yeah, and I think when you go into a job, you go into it without a bias, because you know you're there to be impartial, and that is quite freeing when you can just look at something from all different angles. And in terms of the truth of photography, that's one of the things that I love about news photography, and that kind of I think James Natchway said this in a really good way, that our job was to record truth and make powerful images that kind of shake people out of their indifference, and that's what a really powerful news image can do, and that is really something to aspire to. But that's the exciting thing about news, isn't it? You never know what's going to happen, and that's what I love about it, because you're sent to something and you don't know what's going to happen. And also being there when a moment in history is being made.
A lot of other photographers in other genres talk about finding a style, or showing a photographer that's that photographer that's taken that picture, they become known. Do you find that because you have to take the picture and represent what is right in front of you, that's sometimes limiting, or do you think that you can still do that?
I don't think so. I think we all have our own style that's developed, and we can shoot the same story and the pictures will be so different. And I love that. I mean, I like looking at my contemporaries' work, because I love, you go and do a job and everybody, you might have 10 photographers there or more in the past, and you come away, and if you can see how someone shot it, you might think, oh, fair play. They went outside the box on that one, and that's interesting, and that's part of it as well. If you're there, there is some friendly competition, as Leon knows. And you know, part of it is being able to shoot a news story in a way that is slightly unique whilst being truthful, and that's the fun of it. And I can look at a set of images. If I was to be on a news desk and see all the images coming through, I could pick out a Leon Neal, I could pick out an Andy Rain, you know, because everybody has their style comes through.
When it comes to news photography, you know, what level of editing do you do? Because if we think about other genres of photography where people change all these colors, they crop in bits and out, and, you know...
That's just cheating.
Yeah, from a news photography perspective, if you start making those alterations, it changes the image, it changes the truth, right?
There are some news photographers who like to put a little kind of kink in there with their edit, whether it's the grading or whatever. Right. But for me, it's about making it look as natural as possible, as I saw it with my eyes. If I start making it colder, making it whatever, then it's kind of, that's not what happens.
I think a good rule of thumb is if you could do it in the dark room, then it's kind of okay to do digitally. But a lot of the time, there purely isn't the time to spend on doing crazy edits, because we're on the clock. We are competing against each other, but we're also on deadlines. When you're working for a newspaper, then you are on very tight deadlines. If you don't get the picture there in time, it's not going to be in the paper and they won't have what they want. And so if you're working on a really big event, you need to get that picture out. So that's really important. So editing needs to be kept to a minimal, really, and try and shoot it as well as you can, given the certain situation.
A lot of the time, most of our stuff now, when it's on a big job, it's coming straight out of camera. Not it's coming onto camera and you're sending it, but it's literally coming straight off camera using transmitters, or in the Z9, just straight off the camera, and you're literally not seeing it again until it's hopefully in a newspaper or on a website, and then you go, oh yeah, they did all right job with that. Or, oh my, why did they crop it like that?
That's a bit wonky.
Exactly. So it's important to get it right, because odds are you're not going to be playing with it afterwards. But you go in there and often the lighting's bad, there's orange tinges and all this kind of thing, so you're literally shooting it, trying to get the white balance right for the room. And talking seriously, you can have a photo call with a prime minister or a president, 15 seconds.
Right.
And you're literally in the room, they walk in and go, shake hands, okay, everyone got it, walk out, and you're running out of the building and then transmitting, and that's it. So it's not just a case of you've had time to think about the picture, get everything right, and then you're sending it and knowing that it's in there. You've also had a really hard time getting the picture as well, so it can be quite challenging.
I mean, I suppose when it comes to look, one of the things that I think has changed is that more people are taking pictures than ever. So one of the questions I really wanted to ask is that has what you do become more difficult because you are professional news photographers? Either you're sent there by agencies or you're there to capture an event, and then someone comes up with their phone, takes a picture, and all of a sudden that picture is on the front page of a newspaper. Is that something that's happening more and more, or how do you feel about that?
I think that's only when they get there first. If we're there, it's unlikely, but there have been occasions. Yeah. Because sometimes members of the public actually have better access than we do. They're in a better position, because sometimes people try to control where we are and what we do, which is very frustrating because we are also members of the public. Yeah. If something happens, a big event, or just something, unfortunately, like a terror incident or anything like that, any snap news, somebody will be there, and everybody has a camera on their phone. And so we do have to live with the fact that somebody's going to get that picture first. It won't be better than what we can do, but sometimes the first picture is the best picture because it's news, and the way things are at the moment, everything is about how quick you can get things out there.
I think a big thing going forward is there is less access available a lot of the time. So obviously if something happens, terror attack, something nasty or something big happening, then you just have to accept that you're not going to have the picture of thing going bang or whatever. But moving forward, I think a lot of companies such as Getty and things are realizing that the future is going to be access. And so they will be working to build relationships with things to like guarantee access in. So while everyone has got a camera on them, I think the thing that is going to become rarer isn't going to be the photograph of the moment. It's going to be the photograph inside or backstage or whatever. That's going to be the thing that becomes more valuable, because the odds are everything will be documented. And when you step into the realms of people wearing cameras that are constantly rolling and things, then literally there will never be anything missed again.
But that's where the quality of the image becomes important, because those pictures taken on mobile phones, they might be important on that day. But when you talk about iconic images, no iconic image is really being shot on a mobile phone, because you're talking about kind of, it can be the way something is lit, and you can look at something that is very powerful and very dramatic, and sometimes it's hard to look at the things that we shoot. It can be difficult, but that stuff is there for a purpose. We do need powerful news images to show people what's happening in the world, because it does make a difference and it is essential, really.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think the element also of approaching a story as a news photographer and understanding the legality of the situation, knowing what you can do, what you can't do, who you can photograph, where you can be, all that kind of thing. If you start taking pictures in from members of the public who've been shooting, you don't know the background, you don't know how it was got, you don't know whether there was any pressure, you don't know whether there's any posed up. You need the validity of independent media.
And there have been terrible incidents where people have taken graphic images on their mobile phones. We do have a code of practice, code of ethics that we do adhere to, and it has to be in the interest of the public for us to show what we put out. And so that's a very fine line, a distinct line between members of the public taking pictures on their phones and professional news photographers working in the field.
Those hard-hitting images, you report on everything. The news reports on everything. It reports on the best of us and the worst of us, and I think, is that something that you find difficult personally, or do you have to just look past that in some cases because you're trying to just capture that moment in front of you? Or?
Weirdly, it's been said many times before, but the camera often just acts as a shield to what you're witnessing.
Right.
And it can be for the good things and the bad things. I know when I used to shoot music photography, you'd be shooting a band, and then afterwards people would say, what was played? What were the songs? And you're like, I don't know.
Right.
I was there photographing, but I can't remember any of it. And it's the same to some extent for news. Obviously, there are things that you just can't escape is going to affect you, but I think that does help, because when you're working behind the camera, you're thinking about composition, you're thinking about making sure everything's right, so it adds a little buffer. So you think about it afterwards, and it can't help but move you, but
it does offer that layer of kind of protection. It kind of gives you that bit of distance between the subject, and that can only be good, because some photographers, we have witnessed some serious things, and if you're absorbing all of that all of the time, it can be difficult, But you're working and you're thinking about the situation, and you're looking through the lens, and it is completely different.
So I think the key thing that I really always wanted to ask as well is, sometimes the news is portrayed as being like, it's all these bad stories, right? So we always really want to tell the truth, but are you sometimes trying to look for the little light moments, the little kind of, the comedy moments almost that are in things that are happening around you? Not necessarily when, you're obviously just shooting one single thing in front of you, but if you're covering an event, or if you're shooting a particular, something that's happening, are you then trying to think, actually, you know what, let's document that, but let's also get some of the comedy aspects out of that as well?
Well, there's a traditional phrase in British journalism of, if it bleeds, it leads. And that's just along the lines of bad news sells.
Yep.
That's why every day the front page will invariably be a bad thing. So that is what pays our bills most of the time, is covering, unfortunately, bad stories. But that doesn't stop you from trying to find an angle within that story that will raise a smile, whether it's covering politics and finding that moment where you're kind of bursting the bubble a little bit and pricking the pride of somebody, and finding that angle that raises a smile, or whether it is occasionally you will be at a job and you will just see a little moment totally unrelated. But yeah, I'm all for humour in a picture, obviously. Yeah. Time and a place. I'm not going to be at some kind of war zone going, how can I make this funny? But no. At the same time, it's I think it's important to get a little bit of a balance of life. So.
Yeah, and newspapers, I know people talk about them being full of bad news. There are some good news stories that we do cover, but again, a newspaper is a product. Yeah. And so, like with any product, you put what people are interested in, what people will buy. And that means sometimes when you have a story that is really important, or you feel it's very important, it has a limited time in a newspaper because people lose patience with it.
When it comes to other types of photography, a lot of people sometimes say or reference other photographers and they go, oh, I take inspiration from this, or I take inspiration from this photographer who does this with their particular artwork and takes these styles of pictures. But I don't know if that's the case with news photography. Do you look at other photographers' work, or do you look at other front pages and you think, I can see how they've taken that image, and does that affect you in any way, or are you just solely?
I think that it's important to have your own style and your own take on things. And I think when you first begin your career, when you work in local newspapers or however you come up, you emulate the style, the house style of the place where you first begin, perhaps.
Right.
And then kind of, once you've got your grounding, you find your own way of looking at things, because we all have our unique personalities and you bring that to your work. And while there are lots of photographers that I absolutely admire, I can't say that I saw a certain picture by somebody and it shaped me as a photographer. It just doesn't really work like that for me. I don't know about you.
I agree. I think looking back at historic, iconic press pictures, they will be based around an iconic moment. They're no doubt great pictures, but it was being there that made the difference. And if I'm not there, then I'm not going to get that style of picture. So the greatest influence for me on a daily basis is going to be how my colleagues cover the story. And as Lucy was saying earlier on, if there's 10 of you in a room, you're going to have 10 different styles of picture. And that's the thing that inspires me most, is trying to find a different way to look at the story.
I think that element of competition keeps you sharp as well. Because if you see they've outshot you and you think, okay, I better bring my game up a little bit next time,
So I suppose a lot of the time you're obviously taking these pictures, but you're not the ones that put them on the front page of the newspaper, and you're not the ones that come up with the headlines. Do you think that sometimes your images get misrepresented, if that's the right word, or you didn't think of it in that way when you took it?
There are times where what's written with your picture you might not even agree with. Right. So you don't have that level of control over your work, and but you need to have to be able to live with that to kind of to keep working, really. As a photographer, you're often the public face of the media, because you're the one walking around with a ton of camera equipment. Everybody knows that you work in the media, whereas a journalist can just, go around, nobody knows who they are or what they're writing. And actually, I've been out and about where I'm getting flack for something a journalist has written or something. It's like, I don't write these things. I record what's in front of me. I don't make the story that goes with it. So that can be difficult at the beginning, but now I'm completely used to it.
I strive to have the image in the position where somebody won't know what my politics is, which can be hard in life, because with social media and stuff, it's very hard to keep your mouth shut a lot of the time.
So I think we've gone through some incredible topics there. One final question I want to ask you guys is, if there was somebody that was starting out either as a photographer or wanted to get into either documentary, news photography, just reporting on things that are happening around them, what would your advice be to them?
I'd say that it is a very difficult field to get started in and to be in. And I think a lot of older photographers can be a bit not necessarily encouraging of people coming through the ranks. But I do think that people have a unique perspective, and I think that especially when you're young, you don't have any ties. You don't have a mortgage, you won't have children, you don't have to worry about those things. So you can afford to be thinking outside the box, taking a little risk, go and look at an event. So I definitely recommend that you would be out there looking for stuff to shoot, because the only way you're going to improve is by repetition and by being involved in it completely.
100% agree. That's a perfect answer. I would say on top of that, I wrote something a few years ago on tips for an aspiring photographer kind of thing, and one of the ones that comes to mind is be a yes person.
Right.
And it's not yes to throwing your morals out the window or anything like that, but a lot of the time, if you are starting out in press photography, the reason why your phone rings is because the desk is desperate.
Right.
They're not kind of gone, hang on, I'm going to go straight to Leon, that guy I've never heard of before and don't know. He's my first choice. It's because they've gone through everybody else and they've got down to you. If you, for any reason, say no at that point, that's your one chance gone. And if you are available to work, there will be something to shoot. So while you are independent and young and not tied down by anything at all, financially or anything like that, then go for it. If people are asking for how to approach things, one thing that I always say is, if you have an event, it's the bookend that's the important part. Because if you imagine somebody is about to make a big important statement and everyone is desperate to know what's being said, the moment as that person walks in the room, they are thinking, how's this going to go? How's this going to play? How am I going to look? And so they're not concentrating on their image. They're thinking about literally walking to the stage and not falling flat on their face. So you might get something a little bit weird, a bit of nerves on their face, a little bit distracted. As soon as they're on stage and they're talking, they know how they should be behaving. They've got their well-practiced kind of curved finger points and all this kind of thing, and big expansive power moves and all that. And as soon as that's finished, then the relief will flood through them. And once the applause has happened or whatever, as they are packing up, sorting their papers out, walking off stage, you're going to get another totally different moment. And it's those moments on either end, possibly even 10 seconds on either end, that will beat the hour-long talk that you had in between, because it is just looking for something a bit different.
Thank you so much. We've talked about some really interesting topics, and I think I know a lot more about news photography than I ever did before. So I can only thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for everybody that's watched along with us. Hopefully you've enjoyed this episode of Nikon Sessions, and I will see you for the next one.